Week 6 is in the books. Welcome to Week 7 for the Fantasy Knuckleheads Daily Fantasy Show. Let's get things kicked off here. Alex, if you don't mind sharing out the link to those folks on Twitter, see if we can grab people to join. I'll try to do the same while we're flying through here. Let's bring up what we talked about in Week 6, just to give you guys a recap of the folks we spoke on. Let's filter out Week 6, and let's see. Carson Palmer, we touched on him. Decent game. Nick Foles, good game. Roethlisberger sucked, so that was a big miss. Locker did not play, so good thing we had that caveat there. Bortles, people refresh my memory. I wasn't looking at this game much.
He had that late touchdown, but he didn't really do much. But he looked better than he did the week before. So positive steps for my man crush.
Steps forward for your quarterback man crush outside of Carson and Matt Ryan, of course. Let's see, our running backs hit on LaShawn. That was a nice big game for him. Finally broke out. Andre Ellington did pretty nicely. Andre Williams was I don't want to say if he was a bust, but I mean that whole offense
he was a bust.
really
terrible. I mean, look, it was the right call. It's just they were terrible.
Yeah, they were really
nothing. I mean, that whole offense couldn't put anything together. So
yep.
he wasn't good. Bishop Sankey wasn't good. Jordan Cameron. We're going to switch to the tight ends. Jordan Cameron had a nice game. Clay Harbor had a nice game. Where are we? Tim Wright. He got in the end zone as well.
One catch.
Yeah, but
one catch, but it's still.
That's what I warned about. It
was the right catch.
Counts.
Right. It was the right catch. No pun intended. Zach Ertz got in the end zone as well. He had a lovely game. Donnell, again, like we just said with Andre Williams, the Giants' entire offense was just not good.
Notable, though, Donnell did, if you weren't watching the game, Donnell did catch a touchdown. It was called back by holding, but he did catch a touchdown.
A freakishly amazing touchdown.
Yeah.
But it got
the guys got skills, right? I mean,
zeros in a row and not panicked on him.
I don't think anybody's arguing the guy's got skills. It's just he's got to be able to put them all together and get things moving, you know. But we'll see in the upcoming weeks how he does. Let's move to wide receiver from last week. Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey. They both put together, I think, 100-plus yard games. Very nice games for them. Roddy White, I thought, I'll be honest, I was watching that game very closely because I played Roddy White in a couple of leagues. Holy crap, I thought he was going to get killed. There were 3 or 4 hits where he just took a shot. Right, he was coming over the middle and just absolutely got obliterated. I mean, I was surprised he was consistently going. So, not a great game for him, but you know, I'm surprised he's still in one piece. Let's see, Golden Tate, another good game. Michael Floyd, good game. Allen Robinson, I don't think he had a great game. Again, wasn't really paying attention to that. Kendall Wright, can you guys?
Tate's game could have been better, by the way. Tate saw almost 40% of their team's targets. You know, we talked about one of the comments we made on last week's show was how Stafford has a tendency to lock in on a target. And he definitely did on Tate. Didn't have as huge of a day, I think, as he could have had. And I think perhaps, you know, a lot of people will just look at the bottom line and see, okay, he had an all right game. Tate remains a good play, in my opinion, moving forwards.
Kendall had 1 catch.
So we missed on Kendall. But we threw the caveat in there. We didn't really miss on it. We threw the caveat in there that don't touch him if Locker wasn't playing. So again, Locker was out. Weather was horrible. Hopefully nobody touched him.
Robinson actually had a decent game. 9 targets, 8 catches, 68 yards.
Wow. So
nice
he did
for DraftKings. Yeah.
He did pretty well. Yeah, full PPR. He did pretty decent. He got you double digits. Can't hate on double digits when you don't even have a touchdown. So that's at 3,700 last week in DraftKings. I'd take that. Marvin Jones didn't play. We saw Sanu's huge game, so there was that.
He's out for the year now.
What's that?
He's out for the year.
Jones is done for the year. Oh, boy.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
Yep.
Holy crap. Alex, I'll let you have your 10 seconds to brag about Jarius Wright.
All right, Jarius Wright didn't have a good week, but I was right. He's still the number one. He's still the number one looked at receiver for Teddy Bridgewater. So he didn't have a good week, but he still was better than every other Minnesota Vikings receiver. So he's still the guy moving forward. I've talked to a few people that, should I drop Wright? No, you shouldn't. If Bridgewater continues to grow, he's going to lean on Jarius Wright. Jarius Wright is a good play in regular fantasy as well as daily going forward.
Yeah, seeing Bridgewater's game, I don't know if I really trust any Vikings receiver just yet, but if you do want to go with one, you might as well get the one that's getting the most targets. So
right, it's not one of those, let me put him in as my wide receiver 3 and stick with him. It's more of a put him on your bench, stash him, and as he progresses, you can play him in daily.
Right. All right, so let's move on to Week 7. We've got 25 guys, I think, to talk about here. We're going to go game by game and see if we can hopefully win some money this week and erase the bad memories of my lineups from the 2 weeks past. So, first off, let's start with Arizona and Oakland. We're going to look at Carson Palmer, 7,300 on both DraftKings and FanDuel. He came back from his injury last week, had a solid game, nothing too crazy, but going up against this Oakland defense, and I'll throw this to you, Alex, and I'll just throw Michael Floyd in there really quick. 5,000 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. I mean, he's going up against an Oakland D that just gave up, 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to Phillip Rivers. Are we looking for the same type of performance out of Carson this week?
Absolutely. Carson looked fantastic this week. He's back. He's healthy. That nerve has apparently fixed itself. He's throwing the ball. And if you followed Carson at the end of last year, Carson loves Michael Floyd. He grew into that number 1 role. That's why he shot up draft boards this year in regular fantasy. Michael Floyd, if you still own him, hold him. If you want to get rid of him, don't be an idiot. He's such a great wide receiver. And for his price to be $5,000 for a guy that could be a fringe wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, Floyd, I think, is the better play of the 2 this week because I feel like Floyd's going to go an easy 8 catches, over 100 yards with a score, with Palmer throwing the ball. If he gets, like you said, if Palmer can get the same production as Phillip Rivers, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, Floyd's going to be a big part of that, and Floyd's a great play. I issue a little more caution with Carson Palmer on DraftKings just because I want to see him do it 2 weeks in a row and stay healthy. But on FanDuel, this is almost the must-play price.
Pete, you got anything to add on there?
I mean, when I look to see if I want to play somebody, I look at names near that price range, and I like to see and look if there's anybody in the same realm who I would play over that player. And honestly, on FanDuel, I think the answer is no. Palmer at 7,300. Eli Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, a little more expensive. I think I like Palmer over both of them. The names directly below him: Alex Smith, Kyle Orton. Not moving there. Yeah, I think he's a good play this week. Oakland can be had in the air and on the ground. He's got weapons. We had a Larry Fitzgerald sighting. It's like he woke up. Oh yeah, I could see a play where I would use Palmer if I had to. I think it's very reasonable at that price.
Okay, we'll move on to the next game then. Looking at...
Oh, real quick, if I can get in on this game, I'm sorry, name's not on the list. I do like Ellington a lot this week. He's 7,100 on FanDuel. We don't have him on the list, but in this game, look, Oakland can be run on. Running backs put up big fantasy points against Oakland, and they don't have anybody else. So I like Ellington.
Yeah, his price is still low. I wouldn't necessarily call it a complete value, especially like kind of how we talk about on our Tuesday podcast, but
right.
Ellington is a great play, and I personally have him in my preliminary lineup for this week because his price really isn't that bad. He's still a guy that has running back 1 upside for mid-tier running back 2 price. So
yeah, he's getting the work.
We'll touch on him probably
Thursday
or later this week when we talk about our lineups because I have another guy that I want to talk about. I'm getting bugged by one of my good friends to plug Jamal Charles, so I definitely want to plug him in a few lineups this week and see where the chips fall on the other positions. But Let's move on from Arizona and Oakland. Let's move to Atlanta and Baltimore. Looking at Atlanta, our first value play here, 3,800 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel is Antone Smith. I'm not a big fan of him personally, but every time he touches the ball, he scores a touchdown, it seems. So if you're looking for near punt play at 3,800 in DraftKings, you could do worse. We'll list off also Roddy White here. Again, going against Baltimore, 4,100 in DraftKings, 6,700 in FanDuel. You see that value more in DraftKings. Again, full PPR. Roddy White has always been a PPR machine. Don't see that value in FanDuel as much as DraftKings, but he's not going to be all that bad. On those two guys, Pete, any thoughts?
I'll start with Roddy White. I think Roddy White is one of those players. He's kind of a risk-reward play. He's getting a lot of targets, but he's also dropping a lot of passes. I think he's all right. I think he's a reasonable play. In that price range, again, when I look around, there's players I'd rather play over him. So I'm not too big on Roddy White. How can you argue with Antone Smith, though? It's like he just gets in the end zone. I don't know how he does it, but he just always finds a way to reach the end zone. And at $3,800, I mean, if I want to take a shot on somebody, especially in a tournament, yeah, I could definitely play Smith this week. I'd rather put Smith into a DraftKings lineup than I would White on either site.
So I like that. I'm going to move on to Baltimore, because this guy I really wanted to talk about. Justin Forsett. He's 5,600 in DraftKings, 6,200 in FanDuel. So he's kind of middle of the road on both sites. But this guy, he's got a high yards per carry average, right? And going up against an Atlanta defense that just gets burned by the run. I mean, for these prices, Alex, tell me if I'm wrong here, but for these prices, I don't think. Again, this is kind of like one of the plays from. Let's see, who did we look at last week? From a running back perspective, he's kind of like an Andre Ellington from last week. Going up, he's just got a great matchup, middle of the road price. So you may get away with like a contrarian type of play here, but I think he's that value this week. What do you think?
I think he's more so that on FanDuel because he's more of more of running back than catching the ball, and also his price is cheaper relative to the pricing structure on FanDuel than it is with DraftKings. There's also somebody at that price range, like Pete was saying. If there's somebody at that price range that I would rather play, then I'm probably going to pick the guy that's a little lower in that same price range that I like. And for me, that guy, and I'll touch on him again later, is Ben Tate at 5,300. But on FanDuel, it's a much cheaper price. The only issue I have concerning him is that we still don't really know exactly what's going on with that backfield. Any day, Taliaferro could get 10 to 15 carries. Bernard Pierce could get 10 to 15 carries. You don't know what exactly you're getting with Forsett on any given day, although he has been as productive as he has
Last
so far.
week, though, Taliaferro, 2 carries, and both of them came when the Ravens were up like 30 points. You know, I think that situation, Alex, I agree with you. We don't know yet, but it is clarifying itself a little more. I think they're going to lean on Forsett. I really do. And I think at the price on FanDuel, 6,200, yeah. I mean, look, Atlanta is this year's New Orleans Saints. You know, last year you could run all over the Saints, and Atlanta's kind of like, you know, they're passing the torch to Atlanta. It's like, hey, here, this is the team you play all your running backs against. So, I mean, I like the matchup, and I like his usage. I think Forsett is actually a great play in FanDuel. So whoever your buddy is there, Mark, you know, give him like the knuckleheads high five or whatever. Good call.
There you go. Beautiful. All right. Next game we're going to talk about is Buffalo at Minnesota. We'll stick with the Bills. Tight end Scott Chandler. He's going for 4,000 in DraftKings, 5,300 in FanDuel. I threw him on here because I'm not. I don't know. I don't want to say I'm overly confident in him, but he got so many looks from Orton last week that if he's consistently getting those types of looks, he's just gonna keep grabbing those targets. And again, like we said, full PPR on DraftKings, you can't discount, you know, that price because, like we said with Allen Robinson, even if you don't get a touchdown out of these guys, you can still get double-digit points. And for $4,000 at the tight end position, that's a pretty good deal. So, Pete, are you with me on a Scott Chandler pick here? I mean, again, not my favorite pick at tight end ever, but with those types of targets, he can make the grab. He's got consistent hands.
Yeah, I think this is actually a pretty good call by you. I like this call. I think this is similar to my own Daniels call last week, which, whatever. That was a weird game. But I think this is a very good call. It's somebody who not a lot of people are going to be playing. He's not on a lot of people's radar. I think for a tourney play, in particular, somebody who we talk about where you want to get a name in there, you want to get someone in your lineup that's going to have a low ownership percentage in the daily league, I think Chandler's a great play, actually. And again, also a place where you can save money and get production. What's not to like?
I mean,
Can I jump in?
Exactly it. That's exactly it, Pete. You're gonna get good points from somebody who not a lot of people are playing. Go ahead, Alex.
With Scott Chandler, the one thing that I'm concerned with is that Sammy Watkins only had 3 targets and 2 catches last week. I don't really see that continuing going forward, even with Orton at quarterback. At some point, some of those targets are going to be going toward Sammy Watkins and not necessarily toward Scott Chandler. Yes, Scott Chandler seems to be Orton's security blanket, but at 4,000, I feel like there's better value to be had on certain players. Like we keep saying, at that tier pricing, there are some other guys that I like that are a little bit more expensive or even a little bit less money that I would rather play than Scott Chandler, because we've been caught by Scott Chandler in the past. He's been, oh my God, we have to pick this guy up off the waivers. He had a great game, and then the next 3 weeks he does nothing. You drop him, and then he has a great game again. So that, in my opinion, that's somebody that I don't like to trust until I see consistent production from him, showing me that he can be that kind of a player consistently versus inconsistently.
Okay, you were pretty desperate if you're dying to grab him off the waiver wire, but we'll move on to your receiver man crush. One of them, Jarius Wright, 3,400 in DraftKings this week, 4,800 in FanDuel. Again, like we spoke about earlier, I'm not a big fan of him for exactly the same reason you're not a huge fan of Chandler. He's got to do something for me to really, dive into him. But I see your value on him that he is getting the most targets from Teddy Bridgewater. So outside of him getting a lot of targets, is there anything else you have to add there?
I wouldn't play him this week. Buffalo's defense is great, but moving forward, I really like Jarius Wright because he has been getting those targets. Minnesota's trying to get him involved any way they can. He ran for 21 yards last week. He's the guy that has established the chemistry with Bridgewater, and if Bridgewater is going to be a good quarterback in this league, especially this year, he's going to lean on Jarius Wright. But I just wouldn't do it this week against a very, very good Bills defense.
Okay. Moving on to our next game. We're going to talk about Cincy and Indy. Looking at Indy's run defense is terrible. So I looked at Jeremy Hill here, running back for the Bengals, 4,300 in DraftKings, 5,200 in FanDuel. Not quite a bit, and they use him rushing. He could get you double-digit touches, and he can surpass, especially going against that Indy defense, who at any given time can look absolutely terrible, especially for a full half of the game. They just look god-awful week after week. I think he's a value play here who you're going to see less than 1% owned, especially in a lot of these big tournaments. If you're looking for somebody who's going to get you potentially in the end zone, he's going to get you probably anywhere between 70 and 100 yards. I think this is your play. Pete, are you with me on that one?
Well, you guys know I played Hill last week, as we talked about on the Thursday show. I think, again, he remains low enough that he's a very reasonable play. Bernard did get a little banged up during the game, and we don't really have any indication on how serious the injury is, although he did return, so probably not too bad. I think Hill remains a good play. Cincinnati is going to run the ball. Indianapolis, as you pointed out, has difficulty stopping the run. 1 + 1 = 2, right?
See, that's what I like. That exactly.
I'm agreeing with you, Mark. What's happening this week?
I mean, I don't know, but let's move on before it stops. Let's go to Reggie Wayne. We seem to talk about him a lot. He's going for 4,900 on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel. So DraftKings, you're seeing more of a discount on him this week. After seeing what Benjamin did to Cincy's secondary, is that why you're buying Reggie Wayne on DraftKings this week, Alex?
Can't hear you. Sorry.
Do you love some Reggie Wayne?
After
I do love some Reggie Wayne. All right,
Kelvin
so
Benjamin
I assume you're asking me about Reggie Wayne.
Yes, go.
All right, yeah. Okay. The fact that Reggie Wayne's price is basically, at best, the flex play on DraftKings this week is a joke. Reggie Wayne is still Luck's BFF. I know he and Hilton lit it up last week to the tune of Hilton going for over 220 yards. But in PPR leagues, especially like DraftKings is, Reggie Wayne is the guy that's going to get a lot of targets, and we've seen this year that his price hasn't really gone up to where it should be because he hasn't really been able to string 2 weeks in a row that really like vault his value up on DraftKings. But he also hasn't had 2 bad back-to-back weeks. So he had that bad week last week. I feel like he's due for a positive regression this week. He's one of those guys like we were talking about in DraftKings. He's a guy that can get you double-digit points without even scoring a touchdown, and if he gets in the end zone, you're looking at a monster day. So on the off chance that Reggie Wayne gets a touchdown or just that he gets 8 catches for 80 yards, he's a great play for a cheap price. He's a safe 50-50 play. I don't necessarily recommend him for a tournament play because the upside is only there if he goes for 10 catches, 100 yards, and a score. But as a safe play for a cheap price for a guy that you can kind of slot in as a wide receiver 2 in regular leagues, it's almost a no-brainer.
Okay, I'll take that. Let's hit up our next game. We've got a lot of people in this one, so let's fly through these if we can. On Cleveland, basically, if you got them, play them. They're playing Jacksonville, so looking at Brian Hoyer, 5,600 DraftKings, 6,400 FanDuel. Ben Tate, 5,300 DraftKings, 7,300 FanDuel. He's gonna be widely owned in DraftKings this week. I'm predicting because that's just a ridiculous value for someone going up against that defense. Jordan Cameron, again, had a great week this week. Looks like he's on his way back. 4,600 in DraftKings, 6,100 in FanDuel. Your semi-punt play here, especially more specifically in DraftKings, Travis Benjamin, 3,200 in DraftKings, 5,900 in FanDuel. Let's see. Pete, I'll throw it to you first, but I'm going to give you a 1-minute cap. Is there someone in particular that you like the best out of those 4 plays this week on Cleveland?
Maybe Cameron, maybe Tate. One name we did not throw in there, so I'll start disagreeing with you already. Isaiah Crowell at 5,300 on FanDuel. Last week in a blowout had 77 yards and a score. Just somebody to keep an eye on, especially since Tate is not the healthiest of fellows. Overall, I think they're all pretty good plays. Probably, maybe Hoyer the best, because between Benjamin and Cameron, I don't care who he gets the ball to as long as they find the end zone. So probably for the price, I think I like Hoyer the best out of the Cleveland plays. But look, you want a punt play? How about Isaiah Crowell? You've got the possibility of garbage time. He produces anyway, and if you want a third reason, well, Ben Tate is sort of fragile.
It's a very good point. He's been a pretty nice play the past couple of weeks. He like you said, he leapt Terrence West, I think it was, in the depth chart, and he's kind of like Justin Forsett in that his yards per carry average is very high, and he seems to be getting in the end zone pretty often. Again, I love on DraftKings. I still love Ben Tate at that 5,300 price, and I'd still pay him. I'm guessing Crowell is. I don't have it in front of me right away. I'm guessing he's minimum 3,500 at the max, so I'd still spend that extra money on Tate. Moving to Jacksonville.
Wait, let me jump in, please.
For what? What do you have to add?
Tate, I just want to say Tate is my thank you DraftKings for free money play of the week. So Ben Tate the last 2 weeks has been what?
What's he at on DraftKings again?
5,300. He has been an RB1 the past 2 weeks, and he's going up against quite possibly one of the worst rush defenses other than the Falcons this week. He will get you points. He's a great 50-50 play. He's a great tournament play because of his low price. Get him in your lineups. I know, at least for DraftKings. FanDuel, maybe listen to Pete. But DraftKings, if Ben Tate is not in your lineup, you are not listening to anything that I've said all year.
To be fair, your thank you DraftKings for free money play worked out quite well last week. McCoy.
Yep.
That's right.
Pretty good at those.
McCoy worked out very well. Okay, so now let's hit on the Jags.
We need like flashing text to come on the screen when he says the thank you DraftKings for free money. You know, like one of those little, yeah. All right.
That's right.
Like an official promo.
I'll get balloons dropping from the ceiling next time.
There we go.
Looking at our Jacksonville plays this week, we've got Storm Johnson, 3,400 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel, and Clay Harbor, 4,600 DraftKings, 5,500 FanDuel. Storm Johnson, he was limited in carries, still got in the end zone, but was limited in carries last week. We're hoping that Gus Bradley really gives him more carries this week. From a Jacksonville offense perspective, I mean, I just don't really trust many players on the offense, actually any players on that offense right now. Alex, I don't know if you have anything other than Clay Harbor had a good week last week. Storm Johnson got in the end zone.
I just think that Clay Harbor's price got a little high for my taste. I liked him when he was that bare minimum or somewhere below 4,000, but I don't. At 46, that's a little bit riskier for me. I like his floor, like we've talked about the past 2 weeks, but at 46, you can play Jordan Cameron, and if you're smart enough, you're playing Jordan Cameron over Clay Harbor, at least for this week. But Clay Harbor's still gonna have a nice game, I think. He's becoming that consistent security blanket for Bortles, and we might see his price rise, but hopefully if his price goes down, he's going to be a better play going forward. And with Storm Johnson, if he's going to get the carries, he has to do something. Cleveland isn't as good against the run as the Titans are. He got in the end zone last week, which is encouraging, and if he can start breaking some runs for some extra yards, he's not a bad play, and he's still at kind of that bare-bones punt play price that if you really need to play somebody at running back, you could do way worse than that.
Okay. Move on to the Lions-Saints game. Saints coming off a bye. Reggie Bush expected to be out again. So we're looking at Joyke Bell here, 4,800 in DraftKings, 7,200 in FanDuel. So it looks like DraftKings still discounting him. FanDuel not so much anymore. Golden Tate, again, we mentioned him quite a bit now, 5,900 DraftKings, 6,700 in FanDuel. Looking like Calvin could be held out this weekend, if not another 2 weeks. Pete, tell me, Joyke, Golden Tate, any reason I shouldn't play Joyke this week going up against this porous overrated New Orleans defense?
Joyke, if you guys remember, Joyke was a name I threw out there last week. I think it was during our lineup show. I liked him a lot last week. I thought Bush was going to be out, even though we weren't quite sure. Turns out he was. Not only that, but look, the issue with Joyke is his usage. Is he going to get enough usage? And being in a timeshare, with Bush and the fact that the Lions have other weapons, Calvin Johnson, even near the goal line, Calvin Johnson, that's not an issue. So absolutely, I like Joyke again even more this week than I did last week. Last week he had a nice week. Love him again this week in both DraftKings and FanDuel. I think he's an excellent play.
Beautiful. I don't think we need to go into Golden Tate too much because, again, we touch on him every week, and if Calvin's out, he's that number one guy for Stafford. Alex
Better
mentioned how much Stafford loves his number ones, and yes, matchup's pretty decent as well. So.
And his price went down.
Yeah, go figure, right? I don't get these pricings, but hopefully
it's because he hasn't been doing as well as he had the past 2 weeks with Calvin limited, and DraftKings does that. So Golden Tate,
they're very reactive.
Free money. It's one of those you absolutely have all the confidence in the world to play a guy like that.
Drop the balloons. Thank you, DraftKings, for free money.
DraftKings.
So our next guy, actually, hang on one sec. Our next guy we're going to talk about is Eddie Lacy.
Are you going to drop balloons on me? Is that what you're doing right now?
I am not going to drop balloons, but what I'm trying to do here is say that we're going for your money play.
Ah, there it is.
All right, so Eddie Lacy going up against the Panthers this week. Carolina comes into Green Bay. DraftKings discounted him down to 4,700. FanDuel still has him a bit inflated at 7,700, so I don't like him at FanDuel at all. But 4,700 on DraftKings going up against a Carolina defense that, I mean, they really miss Greg Hardy bad. They can't really stop anything, right? Gio had a nice 80-yard run against them last week. We mentioned not only that run, but Jeremy Hill had a nice game against them last week. I mean, these guys give up yards on the ground and through the air. So looking at Eddie Lacy this week, I like him to not necessarily get 100 yards because he hasn't been that guy this week. This year, the Packers' offensive line just hasn't been that good running the ball. But if they can establish a lead early enough, Eddie Lacy can easily get 20 carries. He can get a touch in the red zone. They can rely on him to get in from 5 yards out against this defense. I like him to score this week. 4,700. I can put him into my lineup and not think twice about it. Either of you guys want to disagree?
I hear that's actually a pretty good country music song. I really miss Greg Hardy bad.
All right, so I guess I'll jump in with Lacy. Are you done with the drum roll? There you go. All right.
Okay, there we go.
All right, so Lacy, we've talked about this. There's no reason that a guy that was drafted in the first half of the first round of regular drafts should be at this price, even if they're going to struggle. But at the same time, Carolina still can do well against the run. I know Bernard broke that big run last week, but Lacy isn't really that big-time home run hitter. He's more of a bend you and then break you kind of running back who's just going to bite off chunks of yards. If you take away those 89 yards, Bernard didn't really have that great of a day. He had, I want to say, anywhere from 40 to 50 yards other than that big run, and he's that that home run type of running back where Lacy really isn't. So if he struggles early, I kind of see this being one of those shootout games where Aaron Rodgers is going to throw the ball a lot and Cam's going to do the same thing because he looks healthy again. It's just one of those, his ceiling is super high, but the chances of his reaching his ceiling is something that worries me. But if 4,700, you could do way worse than a play of Eddie Lacy at 4,700. Just temper expectations big time.
Another thing, and Mark, as a Packers fan, perhaps you can shed some light on this too. I remember McCarthy said they wanted to get Starks something like half the touches from week to week, right? I mean, that's not something you want to hear as a Lacy owner. And I'm not sure that's something I want to hear when I'm considering spending my $50,000 or $60,000 money pool on him. So I don't know. It's a real nice, cheap play, and it kind of screams play me, and I think a lot of people will, but I might not be one of those people.
Fine. Screw you.
I might not get free money
him
from DraftKings.
Homer pick.
4,700. Can't go wrong. He's getting in the end zone this week. I'm calling it.
Yeah, but he doesn't get balloons. He doesn't get balloons.
We're gonna move on. He doesn't need balloons. He's a man.
It's an award-winning novel. No balloons for Lacy.
All right, we're gonna move on to our next game, which is Kansas City.
Also, the name of a segment over at Big Al's. That's inappropriate. I'm sorry.
All right.
Well, come on. No balloons for Lacy? Come on. Where would you go with that if you were making a joke? Would you go award-winning novel or would you go strip club?
I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to touch it. Family-friendly programming.
I made the obvious joke.
Is it, though?
It's not family.
Clearly not. All right. Let's hit up Travis Kelce, Alex's man crush. Still 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,800 on FanDuel. Going up against San Diego, Alex, I'll give you a minute to love him. Go.
It's Travis Kelce. I just need his usage to go up because he is this good. He is one of, if given the opportunity to get the same amount of touches as, say, a Julius Thomas, a Gronk, a Jimmy Graham, this guy is a top 5 tight end. He's so good. I'm sorry. I'll keep it short because I've talked about him so much, but I feel like this week there are other values that you can kind of take advantage of. I like Cameron in his matchup better, just because Kelsey's going up against San Diego. They're going to control the ball a lot, which means that Andy Reid has a lot more opportunity to not play Kelsey, which is very, very bad for daily leagues. It's just one of those things that there are better plays this week, but I would try to get him in my lineup if I had the money, but I feel like Jordan Cameron's just a better play this week just because of the matchup and the fact that San Diego dominates possession and Andy Reid is retarded.
I like KC coming off the bye though. I like them to have a really good game. I wouldn't be surprised if they win this one outright, but I think that Kelsey gets used more like he did in the Patriots game.
I hope so.
I think he catches quite a few balls, but that's me. We can talk that a little bit more on Thursday when you bring Jamal into the conversation.
Still love you, Kelsey.
I think that's actually a good call. Like, coming off the bye week, they're going to figure out what they have in him. They're going to figure out they've got to get him involved more. I think that's actually a great call.
Yep.
Guess I'm putting Kelsey in again then this week. You just convinced me.
Well, you're welcome.
Moving on to our next game, Pats-Jets. It's Thursday night, so we're not going to touch on it too much. I don't know how many people really play into the Thursday lineups. Right? That's the Thursday game this week?
Yeah, it's a Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay. So first thing I want to touch on is Shane Vereen, running back for the Pats. He's 6,500 in DraftKings, 5,900 in FanDuel. I think you're going to see maybe a little bit of change now that what's his name? Now that Ridley's down for the year. I think Brandon Bolden is going to be the guy that's going to get more of the carries, but I think they're kind of going to do a 50-50 split. I think Vereen's going to obviously stay in there on his passing down, so he retains that value in DraftKings when you're getting that full point PPR. But you have to mention him here as a pass catcher against the Jets. You have to mention just about anybody, right? So in that, we'll roll right into Brandon LaFell, 4,300 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. I never, ever thought we'd be talking about Brandon LaFell this year, but the dude just catches touchdowns apparently. So at 4,300 on DraftKings, again, 5,400 on FanDuel. Any shot he gets in your lineup this week, Pete?
For me, no. The only Patriots I still want to use are Gronk, maybe. Edelman, probably not. And Vereen, maybe. I'm really tired of getting burned by Patriots running backs. Every time you think you know what's going to happen, you're wrong. So it's really hard to use anybody on the Pats outside of probably Gronk. Definitely not LaFell. We just touched on it with Tim Wright in the Open. We don't know what's going to happen. He's had a couple of nice weeks, but if you were to have me put odds, like what percent chance do I think LaFell has of finding the end zone this week? It would not be. The Jets' secondary is terrible, but it would still not be very high. Again, I think really, especially when you look at the price, the only Patriots I want to play, Gronk, maybe Edelman, and that's about it.
Well, since it's the Jets, let me jump in. LaFell, probably not a bad play this week. D. Milliner just went down for the season.
True.
I didn't see Antonio Allen this week.
It's not like Darren was starting anybody anyway, though.
No, you're right, but at the same time, he's still
not covering anyone.
Technically, he's our best cornerback. Even though he hasn't done anything this year to write home about, he's still our number one corner, and now he's gone. So now we're still dealing with scraps and heaps and just whatever we can piece together at cornerback. LaFell has had 2 nice weeks of the last 3. I know he had one dud week right in the middle, but he had 2 touchdowns last week. He had a touchdown 2 weeks earlier. He's somebody that Tom Brady is starting to acclimate into this offense. I know that Tim Wright's starting to get a little bit more involved in the red zone, but when he's going deep, LaFell is his guy. Gronk is still that guy that's going to get those intermediate passes and hopefully catch and run for a touchdown. Edelman is going to be the short guy. LaFell is going to be the guy when he wants to go deep, and we've seen that over the past 3 weeks. It's one of those Torney, why not, because the Jets are so bad plays. I wouldn't play him in a 50-50, but at that cheap of a price for somebody that could wind up with a 60-yard touchdown and maybe some extra catches thrown in, it's got upside written all over it. And Shane Vereen, as far as DraftKings go, don't touch him at 65. Bellatrix is just the worst thing ever. Do not touch him. He's a better play in FanDuel, but it's still Bellatrix. I don't trust him. So if I'm picking one or the other, it's definitely LaFell as a high upside play in a tournament.
High upside, but also low floor.
Yeah, very low floor, but
right.
very
I mean,
high
there's
upside.
going to be high risk with, like you said, there's going to be high risk with just about any Patriots player this year, it seems. But let's flip the script over to the Jets side. And I wanted to talk about, I don't think you checked him off. I think I did, Alex. Jace Amaro. He's 3,300 in DraftKings, 5,400 in FanDuel. So if you did, then great, because I was gonna take him off anyway. He got a ton of targets this week. I think he's finally getting into it, right? I don't know what his deal was. Was he dropping passes earlier in the season or something? He just wasn't getting the looks that I thought he deserved. So now he got double-digit targets, I think, this week. He's got to keep that up.
Yeah, he had a bit of stone hands early on in the season, and obviously we didn't know what Decker was doing, and Decker was a big part of the game plan, even when he was suiting up and then leaving the game 20 minutes later like he did for 2 weeks. Curley wasn't really involved. I honestly I didn't see Curley this week. I'm not sure if he was hurt or not. Sorry for not doing my Jets due diligence, but I didn't see Curley this week, which helped Amaro really take over that intermediate game that Curley was really starting to zero. I sent you my list with Jace Amaro. I wrote you a little note saying if Geno wants to be successful this year, Jace Amaro has to be a big reason for that, and he has to dominate that short to intermediate game, and Geno is finally starting to succeed with that. Throwing him the ball helped them move the chains. For a while, we were neck and neck with the Broncos, and we should not have been neck and neck with the Broncos until they just lit it up, and the only reason we lost by 14 was because of a forced pick six at the end of the game, basically from our own goal line. It was a 7-point game other than that pick six. And I know pick sixes do play a big part in spreads and weekly whatevers, but a 7-point game with the Broncos because Geno was involving Jace Amaro screams high upside to me and something that needs to continue going forward if the Jets are going to win any more games this year. Jace Amaro has to be involved. Has to.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
That's why we drafted him in the second round. He has to be involved. We need a pass catcher.
He's a good weapon. You guys can't rely on Eric Decker to be your only your only playmaker in that receiving core. So now let's let Alex take a deep breath. I'll pass this one over to you, Pete. Ben Roethlisberger going up against Houston. He's 5,700 in DraftKings, 7,500 in FanDuel. I'm personally not a big fan of him, so outside of the potentially okay matchup,
Sun potentially.
What are you thinking here for Ben Roethlisberger?
This is where I do the test where I look at the names around him, and I look at the names on the same price tier around him, and I say nope, because right around Roethlisberger you've got Kaepernick at 7,800. I think he's a good play. He looked really good this week, and I know Denver is not St. Louis, but this I really think could be a shootout, even though both teams have good defenses as well. And I see Carson Palmer, who we've already talked about, at 7,300. I like both of those guys over Roethlisberger. I don't see any way where I'm using Big Ben on FanDuel this week. So I'm thinking nope. Did I just agree with you again? What the hell is going on?
I'm so confused. He's a much better play on DraftKings just because of his price, but at the same time, we've talked about this in the past. Cheap plays aren't necessarily good plays, and I don't really view him as one of those good plays this week.
Yeah. Let's move on then to Colin Kaepernick. 49ers are going into Denver this week. He's 6,500 on DraftKings, 7,800 on FanDuel. He put up a hell of a game last night. I mean, it was in one of my leagues. I think it was 40-plus points, 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns. He ran for a bunch. Alex, tell me, I mean, you think he has the chance to do this again in Denver, or will Denver's defense actually show up like the Rams one did not?
I don't think he'll necessarily do exactly what he did against the Rams, but the reason that I like Kaepernick this week, and for anyone that knows me or has read what I've written, I hate Kaepernick. But Geno Smith had a really good game against the Broncos last week, and Geno Smith is that same type of dual-threat quarterback who shouldn't really be throwing the ball, shouldn't try to run all the time, but at the same time, he's going to get those points. He's going to throw the ball. They're going to be down. He's going to have to throw the ball. He's going to have to make plays with his legs. It's one of those junk time stat filler plays that I feel like has a lot of upside, even though that I don't think they're going to come close to winning this game. But if they want to come close, Kaepernick is going to have a huge day. High upside. And he might. It's high upside. It's real high upside. But that's what Kaepernick is. He is huge upside and terrible floor.
I feel like what we've done for pretty much every quarterback playing Denver this year is say you have the potential to get blown out and have to throw to catch up. So there's always that potential as well. So it's just always there with everyone we've seen them.
And they
play.
haven't really been that good against the quarterback this year. They've been giving up points to the quarterback because of their passing attack.
Because of that junk time, right? Because of the junk time stats that they release. So.
And it's not quite last year where they were bleeding points in the passing game. Their defense has definitely improved, but at the same time, when your defense is forced to deal with passing attacks that are having to play catch up at almost all points in the game, they're still going to struggle. No matter how good they are, they're definitely improved, but at the same time, they're still facing teams that have to throw the ball deep, have to get chunk yardage, and have to score points to stay in games. And any defense is going to suffer that way.
In particular, if I recall, they also do very poorly against mobile quarterbacks. Look at Russell Wilson and what he did to them this year and last. So I think actually he's a fairly good play this week. I think this game might be closer than people think, and I think the way it stays close is Kaepernick has a good game.
Yeah.
Probably the only way it stays close.
I was just going to say, I think that's the only way that they stay close. We'll move on to our last talk of the night. Jordan Reed, tight end, going up against the Titans this week. He's 5,000 in DraftKings, 5,400 in FanDuel. We saw him actually play last week, and it was like he didn't miss a beat. Came in with another strong game. So, Pete, you think he can repeat that going up against the Titans defense?
Yeah, actually, I love him in FanDuel this week. I think Reed is an excellent play. Niles Paul, only one catch for 7 yards. That shows you Reed has the job. Some people were worried that Paul might have played his way into more playing time. Doesn't appear that way. I think that Reed is an excellent play for the price in FanDuel. DraftKings is a little expensive at 5,000. There's some cheap tight ends in DraftKings I like this week, so I'm not sure if I'm using them there, but definitely like him in FanDuel.
Okay. Let's see here. That is it for the night. Sorry, Alex, did you have anything to add on Kaepernick that you didn't touch on? I just saw your...
No, you just froze, but no, that was before Kaepernick. I just wanted to be the one to talk about him.
You got him. All right, so something I noticed is that we actually have some chat going on in our watch page. Let's see here. We've got a couple of guys going back and forth. Michael Forte and Xenon Gaming. So let's see. They have some questions here. Who do you think is a good QB pick this week? Xenon asks. I'm thinking Palmer against the Raiders run D. He was our first, I think, value pick that we spoke about. Or maybe Romo up against the Giants. So interesting that you ask about Romo. We had him, Alex had put him into the value list, and I actually knocked him off because we had to dwindle it down. But I knocked Romo off more specifically because of the matchup. The Giants secondary is actually pretty good this year, and even though Foles threw for 3 touchdowns against them last week, he still, I think, left some points on the board. I think their defense doesn't get the credit that it really deserves. Not that it's fantastic, but it doesn't get the credit that it really deserves, and I think... you give me a minute to pull up his prices here. I think he's actually a value if we're looking on DraftKings 7,200, FanDuel 8,000. I mean, you're putting a lot of money into Romo. I just don't know if I really see him exploding and having to throw this week, right? I mean, I think they're going to continue to pound the ball with DeMarco and do well on the ground against the Giants. Alex, again, you selected Romo originally, so tell me, you agree with me, or do you think he can actually be a value pick this week?
I think he can be a value pick this week. It's just I think that Carson Palmer is a much better value pick going up against the Raiders defense. Like we've said in the past, Dallas has become a run-first offense, and they're going to feed DeMarco Murray as much as humanly possible. They're going to keep his streak alive. They're going to keep him going as long as they possibly can, going over 100 yards every week, because he's just been that impressive, and they just want to feed him. So Romo's upside isn't quite as high as Palmer's, and the matchup is a little tougher. So to spend an extra $100 to get a now healthy Carson Palmer in what seems to be a very explosive offense, because he has healthy Ellington catching passes out of the backfield. He has Michael Floyd, who is ready to explode, and he still has Larry Fitzgerald dominating those intermediate games. And he also has that extra outlet of John Brown that can do basically run all different types of routes. So Carson Palmer, we're going to see his price shoot up starting this week, but this is that week where you have to take his value and run with it.
Okay. We've got another question. I'll throw this one at you, Pete. Jeremy asks, what about Stafford at 7,000 on DraftKings this week? So give me 1 sec. I'll pull up Stafford. He's 7,000 on DraftKings, 8,300 on FanDuel, just to give you the comparison. We spoke earlier going up against the Saints defense.
At home.
But Saints coming off a bye, so I always feel like you have to put that out there. Coming off a bye, I think, is an inherent advantage. But what do you feel about Stafford at home? He's definitely without Calvin, right? I think Calvin's definitely out this week right now.
Yeah, right. They might keep him out through the bye.
And I think Reggie Bush the same thing. So he's still without those two weapons. What do you feel? How do you feel about Stafford?
I think he's an okay play, and just okay. And the only reason I would even say okay is the price. Look, the thing is, without Calvin Johnson, he's just not the same quarterback, a fantasy quarterback. And it's hard to play him when he's averaging significantly fewer points per game without Calvin Johnson. It's hard to play him when they ran the ball quite effectively and their defense is good. I think in the case of Stafford, I would rather spend more money and upgrade the tier at quarterback, or spend about the same and take the shot on Palmer, who has the nice matchup and all his weapons healthy.
Okay. Alex, anything else?
I don't think it's a bad play. I just think personally I would prefer those other choices.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
Echo completely what Pete said. It's just I don't know how he's going to continue to vault up his value while Calvin's out, while Reggie Bush is out, and he only has limited weapons. Until Ebron becomes what they drafted him to be without Calvin, his upside really isn't that great. And I know he's a guy that's looked up as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, but without Calvin, he loses what seems like 10 catches, 130 yards, and a score every game. So to take that off of Stafford's upside is very, very detrimental to his fantasy value, and he's just somebody that you can't play in daily until Calvin comes back. But I will say, hopefully his price stays around here or goes a little lower as he maybe continues to struggle until Calvin comes back. The game Calvin comes back, you must play Stafford if his price is around here.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. You want, especially when Calvin is definitely healthy, if his price point is where it is now, I couldn't agree with you more. You want to play him then. But again, like you said, without that weapon, he becomes very, very questionable, and none of those guys have the talent that Calvin has. So when Stafford's throwing off his back foot or just chucking the ball up in the air, you don't have the confidence in those guys that you do in Calvin to come down with it every time. So I think that's a hit for him. I'm with you guys. I'm not playing Stafford this week, but I guess we'll leave it at that. Let's see. I'm trying to look through the chat as well. I think that was about it for questions. Mitch just punched one in. Way to go, Mitch. Last second question there. What do we think about Antonio Brown this week? Is he worth it?
I didn't hear that.
Let me.
roboting.
Antonio Brown, is he worth it?
You need to get a better
8,700 on
connection,
FanDuel. I don't have DraftKings up. I don't know. I mean, look, T.Y. Hilton had a great week against Houston last week. You guys know if you listen to the show, I like spending money at wide receiver. I like loading up and using my dollars there. And I think he's actually probably a pretty good play this week. Between the top three, if you consider the top three to be Brown, DT, and Nelson, yeah, I probably like Brown out of those three. So if I'm spending a lot of money at receiver, I think that's probably the best place to do so.
Okay. As you say that, I'm just real quick trying to bring up the fantasy points against stat that I was looking at last week. And looking at teams versus the wide receiver, the Texans are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're a top 10 in terms of giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers. So if you're looking at, they've given up 90 receptions to receivers this year, which is second most in the league. Who's better than a PPR monster than like Antonio Brown, right? I mean, that seems, he's been very consistent this year too. I don't see much downside in his plays. He may not get you in the end zone like we saw last week, but we'll see about that moving forward. Alex, can you hear me? Can I throw the next question?
Yeah, I'm good. My house might be burning down because the Orioles just lost again.
All right, so we've got one coming in here. What do you think of Beckham or Randall this week since Cruz is out?
In DraftKings, I would go with Beckham. I actually specifically looked at their two prices. I think Randall is at 52 and Beckham is dropped down to 39. I like Beckham more for DraftKings because of the PPR, because we could see him move into that slot role that Victor Cruz has had for the past couple of years, and he could turn into one of those PPR monsters. I don't really know what the FanDuel pricing is, but I feel like Randall is a better bet for yardage and touchdowns. But as a nice 50-50 or even a tournament play in DraftKings, I would personally rather take Odell Beckham in Victor Cruz's spot.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. I mean, Ruben Randall is their real. He's Eli's red zone guy, but if you're looking again for DraftKings, full point PPR, I think you got to go with Odell Beckham because he's going to be more of that PPR guy, that direct replacement for Cruz, in my opinion.
Right, and we're going to see both of their values go up periodically for the rest, because without Cruz, he has to rely on both of them. Because you can't just replace Cruz with just one of them. He's going to have to throw the ball more to Randall outside of the red zone, and he's going to have to throw the ball to Beckham if Donnell's not open as a security blanket, and it's somebody that can play that Cruz role of catch and run from the slot.
Agreed. All right, man. This is the last question because I've got to go.
Yep.
Joe Flacco, is he worth it? He's going up against Atlanta this week. Just to remind you, he's 7,700 in DraftKings, 7,700 in FanDuel as well. Let's take this with a grain of salt. Joe Flacco is not going to throw 4 touchdowns in a quarter again this week, right? So
he's never going to do that again, ever.
Don't expect that. Going up against Atlanta, pretty favorable matchup. But like I said last week, personally, I like the running backs against Atlanta better than the quarterbacks. Now, last week, that was half true. Right, Cutler threw for a boatload of yards, but I think only 1 touchdown, whereas Forte had 2 himself. So, talk to me, Alex. I guess I'll give it to you from there. Do you think Flacco is a potential play at that price point?
I won't ever play Flacco. I'm sorry. I live in Baltimore. I hate Flacco. He's terrible. I have to hear every day Flacco's the greatest quarterback in the league. Flacco's awesome. Flacco deserved his extension. No, he didn't. He's a terrible quarterback that won a championship based on getting hot and his defense bringing him to a championship. So, me personally, no matter what his price is, I'm never playing Flacco. And, like you said, as for this week specifically, the running backs are going to be the ones that get it done against the Falcons. Flacco's going to, I'm not going to say he's going to struggle, but he's not going to do what Cutler did. He doesn't have the weapons like Cutler has in Marshall and Alshon. Yes, he has Steve Smith, and yes, Torrey Smith had a breakout game last week, but Torrey Smith isn't going to be that wide open against the Falcons as he was against the Bucs. And Steve Smith might have a pretty good day, but at that price for Joe Flacco, there are better values, like we were saying, like Carson Palmer, like even Tony Romo, or Brian Hoyer against the Jags. It's a better bet for you to use those guys. I like Palmer and Romo to get more points, and I like Hoyer to have more points per dollar, maybe even outscoring Flacco this week. So just me personally, I don't like Flacco. Could he have a good week? Yes. Would I put money on it? Absolutely not.
Beautiful. All right, then. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for tuning in, for asking questions. This is great. This is the first time I didn't even realize there was like this chat window right next to the watching it, the watch link on YouTube. This is freaking awesome. I'm really glad I found this. So, guys, whoever's watching, asking questions, thank you very much. Come back Thursday. Hit us up on Twitter at MNMilano, at Alex Hanowitz. Thank you guys again for joining. We appreciate it. Good luck, and we'll talk to you Thursday during the games. See you next time, guys.